I've wanted to try a medium format camera for ages. They seem like the ultimate in image quality and the sort of thing that a gearhead photographer like myself should try and aspire to. But would it live up to my expectations? What are my expectations? Is this one of those times you should never meet your heroes? So to answer these questions, I went online and set up a loan of a GFX100sII and a couple of lenses on the Fujifilm loan scheme and waited for the day of delivery. Would there be a low cinematic rumbling when it arrived? So yes, I guess there was a low cinematic rumbling, well at least in my head anyway. So my expectations of a medium format camera are that it would give me the most amazing image quality, something that I'd never come across before. I don't know whether I've set myself an impossible goal because I always wanted to be able to reach into a picture and see detail that just was unheard of, and this medium format look that people talk about, I'm not sure whether that really applies to depth of field, so having a wider field of view with a narrower depth of field, which the bigger sensor gives you. I was just looking for to be blown away with the image quality. I obviously knew it was going to be a bigger, heavier camera, and I didn't really know quite how that would feel to me until I got the camera in my hand and took it out and took some pictures with it. When I first held the GFX100sII, which I think I just refer to as the GFX, you'll know what I mean from this point onwards, it didn't feel quite as heavy as I'd expected. I'm not sure whether that's because, as it's slightly bigger than anything I've ever used, there was a sort of air that it was slightly less dense than I was expecting. So I was pleasantly surprised initially. The lenses I got with the camera were the 20 to 35mm f4 and the 55mm f1.7. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that this is a big camera. My hands aren't that big, and although I said doesn't feel sometimes that heavy, if I'm holding it in, up to my face, I mean, it's not a one-handed camera, so it's a two-handed thing. I mean, these lenses just look like a massive bit of plumbing or something, a bit like drain pipe or something, but it's all in the pursuit of gathering 100 million pixels of data. This is a PASM style camera when it comes to controls. None of your nice Fujifilm ISO dials and shutter speed dials, more of the sort of thing you get on the XH2 or the XH2S. But I mean, that's not a bad thing, as loads of people prefer that anyway. There's also a nice screen on top which shows you the settings you've got at any one time and remains there when you turn the camera off. And also you can set that to show you a histogram. And I was quite excited by that because I've never had that on a camera before, and it's another little gadget that I quite like. But when I was actually out shooting, it turned out that I didn't really look at it very much, but maybe that was something that if I knew I had it and I had the camera for longer, I would get into using more. The EVF was nice too. I think it's similar in resolution to the XH2, which is a cut above the XT5, although I'm not really sure I noticed that much difference between the two. One of the things, I don't know if you can see the screen there. If I take a shot, so that's a single shot, there's quite a lot of blackout from the display, and even when I put it up to my eye and take a picture, it feels like I've got it on like 20th or a half a second or something, instead of I've got it on 160th of a second. It's not a fast camera. If you want bam bam bam, taking shots very quickly, this is not the one to go for. And sometimes that detracts from my personal enjoyment of the camera. It just feels a bit laboured from time to time. But I don't know what else as I said, if you're trying to drag through 100 megapixels, what do I expect? I expect you're just wishing I'd cut to the chase now and tell you about the image quality. So here are some examples that I managed to take between the rain and the fog and the greyness that we've had here recently. So here's the first image I wanted to show you. Obviously a landscape taken quite close to where I live, overlooking some hills and mist and stuff. And this was one of the days there was actually a little bit of blue sky up there. Anyway, if I zoom in on this picture, you will see the ridiculous resolution and detail that's captured by this camera, well, and this lens, I guess. That's zooming into 100%. And you can see the beautiful detail back here and this tower. If I zoom back out again, you can see how small it actually is in the picture. And the sort of detail captured in this heather and everything, it's just amazing. And this is with no sharpening added apart from the default that Capture One puts on the pictures on import. If I show you the original file from the camera, that was where it was, and then I just brightened up the foreground, and I thought the sky was a bit orangey, so I cleared that up a little bit. And if I was to show you if I was to reduce the highlights down, you can see there's all that detail in the clouds, but I always find they always look a bit dirty when I do that sort of thing. So in many ways, I just prefer them almost blown out because that's sort of how they were to me on the day. And then I was aware that with the medium format, the default aspect ratio is this 4:3, which I'm not sure whether I'm actually that keen on in a funny way. And so I made a crop of this to 16:9, and that sort of looks much more like a landscape to me. That was one of the things that I sort of thought about the images coming off the GFX. I wasn't sure whether I particularly liked the 4:3 aspect ratio. I don't know whether that's something one would get used to. Anyway, moving on. This is one of my motion blur images that I used. I've got a ND filter and whacked that on the front. This is a 3-second exposure where I rotated the camera around looking up into a tree. And my observation with these was that I'm not sure whether the 100 megapixels is just a step too far, and it seems a bit of a counterproductive thing to say, but you don't get as much detail because any tiny movement that isn't in the direction of the movement that you want fudges the issue, whereas with lesser megapixels you get a slightly more fine image, if that makes sense. This is the same tree with obviously a static shot, and yeah, again, I mean, amazing detail. If I go up in here, you can see all these tiny branches, and again, that's the overriding pro point of this camera, is this amazing detail. And here again, some very tangled woods. And this is one of the things, when I look at this picture, I mean, it looks great, but it looks especially great when you get really close to it and you can see the depth of field where obviously this branch is sharp, and then going back, it sort of falls off really nicely. So it really sort of wows when you go up close. But I mean, this is a huge image. If we were to print it out, it's going to be pretty massive, really. There is the thing of, do you look at it really close or do you look at it as a whole? But I mean, generally the camera produces beautiful images anyway, but they're even more special when you zoom right in. And then some more tangled trees that I quite like trying to photograph. And it was around here that I started experimenting with the crop ratio. In the GFX, there's an option to shoot with the 65:24 aspect ratio of the X-Pan camera. And this is not something I even thought about before this moment. I don't even know why I was trying the aspect ratio, maybe because I was slightly struggling with the 4:3. And so it produces these really wide panoramic JPEGs. But I wanted to simulate this with my RAW files that I was shooting. So I ended up doing a 3:1 crop of these images to simulate that sort of image, and I really, really liked the results. So this one, it looks so cinematic and draws you in, and I just really love this aspect ratio. And you know, this image is still over 11,000 or whatever it is, 11,600 pixels wide. So it's like a panorama from another camera. So yeah, that was a byproduct of using the GFX that I hadn't really thought about, how much I really like these panorama shots. Moving on again, here's another, I was on that same trip and thought, oh, that panoramic thing would work well here, and crop down to the middle where all this interest is. So I did that crop, which I found a really amazing picture, and it really is like a textural feast of just concentrating on all that beautiful texture in the trees. And when that renders, you can see how much detail there is in here. So yeah, really nice. Another extreme crop of another very foggy day, but beautiful colours, and there's a sort of just very natural sort of feel to the pictures. And on the same day, a picture of my wife, just to show you the skin tones and things that you can get, and also the depth of field fall off. This is with the lens set at 35mm, which is 28mm equivalent f4, and there's still plenty of background blur, obviously, and fog, but yeah, so an amazing function of these medium format cameras is the shallow depth of field. So here's another image showing you the detail and the lovely colours of the GFX. Just amazing. Why I underexposed it so much, I think I was trying to not blow out the sky. So that's the original image, and I brought out the shadows. So you can see there's loads of detail and latitude in the files to mess around with. And then this, it's about 8:30 in the morning, quite close to, obviously the sun hadn't been up long, and again, straight into the sun, a tiny bit of flare here, but beautiful image. And if I zoom in, you can see the wonderful detail. You could almost make an image out of that, and that would be perfectly fine. And investigated my favourite new thing, which was a nice panorama of that, and I was quite enjoying that. You know, things like this little plain trail. It's just amazing, this detail. Although I found myself getting more excited when I'm zooming into 100%, and I don't know whether that's a healthy thing. Moving on, just a more regular image. I was trying to focus down here. This is f11, so I was trying to see the sort of depth of field one has to, or the aperture one has to get depth of field that goes fully into the distance. I think we're still starting to lose focus in these trees down here, but this is obviously quite close. But yeah, obviously lovely detail in the sunlight there. And again, a nice view over the misty lake. Well, it's actually called the Frencham Little Pond, but it's, in my mind, it's always more than a pond, it's a lake. But yeah, if I zoom into these things, just the definition of all these grasses and everything is amazing. So definitely a tool for people who want to extract loads of detail and have the option to crop in on your images. So this is an image of my grandson, and this was shot at 4000 ISO. So if I zoom into some of these darker areas, you can see there is a sort of bit of grain there, but no problem. And I mean, that's amazing to have that at 4000 ISO as far as I can see. And I went on a little walk around a town close to me and shot a few shots to see how the GFX would be in this sort of scenario. And again, I keep on about it, but the resolution and zooming in, you know, that's this sign, you can still read it right down the end of that road, and it just looks all really natural and lovely. This was some of the rain that we've had. This is meant to be a river, but this bit isn't a river. So yeah, a lot of sort of localized flooding. But again, if I zoom in here, I mean, this seems to be my game with this, just zooming in to 100% and even more, and just the detail and the natural way that things are rendered is beautiful. And another, just a street scene. And another one. But I mean, if you want to be doing surveillance and looking at getting, you know, like that sign there, I mean, it's just, and obviously people's number plates and things, but we won't go into that. And yeah, trying to sort of make the pictures a bit more atmospheric, the sun hitting this nice building in the town centre, but reading these signs on the barber shop, it's just crazy. But I mean, obviously I've had this camera for a short space of time, and the wow factor is the resolution for me. And so compared to my other cameras, that is the sort of wow factor, but I have to sort of assess whether that's enough to use the camera when there are other potential compromises about the ergonomics and all of that. So anyway, I'll try and sum that up in my conclusion for you, but I hope those images have shown you a few bits and bobs of what the camera can do. I'm finding it really quite difficult to draw conclusions about this camera. I'm not sure whether I'm sort of part of sort of imposter syndrome, trying out such an amazing high-end camera. You know, am I worthy to discuss it and pass judgment on it? And I don't really mean to pass judgment as such. It's just this informal sort of review that I do. It's just more my thoughts from a perspective of a photographer who takes interior shots and also landscape shots and just, you know, family and various shots like that. So that's where this review is coming from. So I need to sort of get over that imposter syndrome and just give you my views on it. But that's why it's sort of taken me quite a while to put this video out. Anyway, it obviously takes amazing images, which I guess is the main goal of this camera. But from my personal perspective, and I've only had this camera for a short time, obviously, the GFX has not really won me over, and I'm sort of upset by that. I can't believe I'm saying these things about a camera that is clearly the best camera I've ever used, and the image quality is just amazing. But maybe there's more to a camera than just image quality. For certain use cases, this is definitely the camera, and you know, it just delivers on the image quality aspect. From my perspective though, I guess I find the GFX just a little bit too bulky. I couldn't seem to get comfortable with it in my smallish hands. It might be something that I was doing wrong, but I couldn't really get on with this slowness of the shutter sound. It always sounds like you're doing a very slow shutter, and I kept thinking, oh no, I've adjusted it to half a second or something. But yeah, it just gave me the sense that the camera wasn't very responsive, and I don't know, something in there niggled me about that. Another probably seemingly tiny pointless thing is that I don't think it turns out that I'm a big fan of the 4:3 aspect ratio. And I know you could easily crop that in post, but I don't know, just every image, as I showed in the section about the image quality, I just love more wide images, not tall, thin or square images. There's also the size of the files at 200 megabytes a pop. That's pretty big anyway, but if you do anything to the files, I did a HDR merge of 3 raw files in Capture One, and it came out with a 609 megabyte file. So you've really got to be thinking about your storage if you get something like this. On the upside, on my MacBook Pro M3 Max, I didn't really feel that the editing experience was particularly any slower, so that is a good thing. I've really loved trying the GFX, and I feel so lucky to have had the chance to do so. And I know that may sound like a bit of a contradiction when I say that, at least for now, I think I sort of laid to rest my desire to actually own this camera. The question of what camera one should actually get is such a complex one, and this process of trying this camera has really set me thinking about my constant quest for better gear, which sometimes feels like it actually just gets in the way of going out and taking pictures. I'm planning to do a video comparison between the GFX and the X-T5, which I know on paper is really unfair, but hopefully it's going to be quite interesting when you take into account a broader set of parameters than just the technical specifications. So they were my thoughts on the GFX100sII after having the camera for admittedly very short space of time. So I hope you found that interesting, and I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and hit the like button, as that really helps the channel. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.